the psychotic and the guru are both swimming in the same ocean, but the guru's swimming and enjoying the water, and the psychotic is drowning in it. That's some famous saying. Now, if we add into that picture dry land, I think all the normal people are standing up on dry land. And I think if we try to describe the difference in a simple way, is the psychotic person is in the water, and the water is this realm of consciousness where all things blend into one, and you can read each other's thoughts, and you can see the symbolic connections between all people. That's
the psychedelic world.
And that's the psychedelic world. And the psychotic person is in that world. So in a sense, they have access to that genius type of consciousness, but they're drowning in it. They don't know how to swim, and they don't know how to get out of the water.
We now bring you Enter the Freud.
This is for entertainment purposes only. It is no way medical advice.
We have a plan. We're going to play a little game. It's a super unstructured game. But the game is, we're going to pick people that some of us think we know about, and then we're going to try to guess whether they're in a state of either psychosis, a state of potential altered hallucination, or have they reached the alternative of enlightenment?
Well, I think that's a good game, and I bet there's people out there that would be good examples. Mostly the sadhus in India would be the best. We could like walk around the streets of India with a camera and be like, all right, let's talk to this sadhu, and talk to him for a couple hours, and then be like, all right, is he psychotic or is he enlightened?
Oh, dude, that would actually be so awesome. That would be a really good exploration. But the only person I think that's actually a good example of that is Kanye West right now, because people have been calling him an artistic genius. I think I don't know his music. I'm not qualified to speak, but I have heard lots of people who seem legitimate say that back like 15 years ago when he first came out with some stuff, that he was like an artistic genius back then. And my hunch is that his artistic genius days have been over for quite a while, but he actually was an artistic genius. But then we were trying to find other examples besides Kanye, and I don't know. Look, okay. So I don't watch the news. I'm not really plugged into any social media, but I came home last night and I sat down on the couch, and as I was just like, okay, I got to get some calories in, I turned on the TV, and it was maybe Fox News, and it said, Trump is about to speak. And I was like, what? And so I sat there and I waited, and then Trump comes out. He starts to deliver this message about how he is the savior. He's come to deliver us from a world we are scheduled for termination, but he alone will save us. And I thought to myself, all right, he's a pretty good candidate too.
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about Trump. Trump's a good one. And both Trump and Kanye, they both have a similar state of narcissistic psychosis, which is not a diagnostic term you hear, but they both have that same state.
Well, no, so we have to play the game first, right? Because okay, but hold on. I think before the game, I think we gotta segue from last week's and just like kind of give the lay of the land. I'll just do it. So last week we were talking about psychedelic states, psychotic states, delirious states, and we didn't really say it, but there just was this general idea emerged that, okay, most people don't, psychologists or therapists who work with more severely mentally ill people know this, but most people don't know this or aren't aware of it, and even most therapists aren't aware of it. But the human mind
can be in very different states. And last week I was talking about how when I was a kid, I would get sick. It would suck me into these different states. And then as a young adult, meditating would suck me into these different states. And then different psychedelic substances can suck you into these different states. I think I mentioned in the talk last week, occasionally when I'm sitting with patients, I'll get into weird different states.
Right.
And so this general idea that we were exploring last week is that human consciousness is actually much more malleable or transient or impressionable. Like it's every person's consciousness is different, and our consciousness can go into these different states, subtly different states or radically different states.
Yes.
And then, so the question then emerges, I think, is like, all right, so what states of, like, having our consciousness be in a normal state versus, and I don't even think there is a normal state. I think everyone's in a different state, but we think that there's like the normal state of consciousness. But the question emerges is like, what state of consciousness or consciousnesses, or where should we have our consciousness go?
Yep.
And then when you ask that question, it's good, I think, to start thinking about like the ideal or the optimal or the highest or the enlightened state of consciousness. And when you start thinking about that, those people, they're not in the normal state of consciousness. They're in these different states of consciousness. And so then the question starts to be like, okay, oftentimes mental health is kind of described in terms of a bell curve, like you're within the normal limits. And if you start deviating from the normal types of consciousness, oftentimes that's a sign of mental illness. And so is there a difference between the optimal, like on the bell curve, is there like a better state of consciousness that very few people are in? And are those the enlightened people or the artistic geniuses or the great spiritual teachers? And then is there a worse state of consciousness?
Yeah.
Or is it not that simple? And obviously I don't think it's that simple. And so it just starts to raise the question of different states of consciousness. What's better? What's worse? What's genius? What's madness? And then how do psychedelics fit in? And are people using psychedelics to move towards growth, to move towards spiritual enlightenment, to just break up the status quo? Okay, so this is the general topic that we're kind of exploring here.
Okay. So
using specific examples could be a good way to explore it.
So I was posing it as a game just because as you point out, are there states of consciousness that are better that we should head towards? Are there some that are worse? And then what this brings up, when you say there's a bell curve, well, there is this concept called consensus reality, right? And fundamentally, it just means that a certain amount of people within a group agree upon the way the world works. And so, but what is happening is there's recently this really bizarre kind of discussion that there is a consensus reality, like almost like I think this goes back to Greek thought, like there's a perfect understanding of reality, and then all others fail in comparison. But as we will look, suppose we look at Kanye West or Trump is a better example, because there he is and he's vilified. Everybody that I know thinks he's a total clown and just a madman. And then there are various other people who actually think he is going to deliver us from a world of pain. Right? So what this points out immediately is that there's more than one consensus reality, depending on which group you affiliate with. And this has always been the case. This has always been the case. There's a French consensus reality. Within America, there's like 50 billion of them. It just depends on what subgroup you are affiliated with. Because within those groups, you have these really interesting ideas that, oh, well, if I'm a Scientologist, potentially I should be working on clearing up all of my various thetans and making it so that I hit the level of clear, which is the Buddhist, it's equivalent to a Buddhist enlightened state.
Yeah.
But so I think I'm talking too much already because I just wanted to say.
So let me say something. I think that this consensus reality is a good concept to use to try to navigate this. Okay, so in most like one consensus reality is that different humans are different and we each kind of have our own thoughts and we can each think different things and no one really knows what the other person is thinking. And then we could have a madman, a psychotic, crazy person come and be like, I can read everyone's mind, right? And I don't want you to read my mind, so I wear tinfoil on my head, kind of thing. Okay. And that person, they're just psychotic, right? Because they are homeless and they can't work and they crawl around like eating trash out of the trash cans and they wear tinfoil on their head and they say they can read people's minds. So we just think, okay, that person's psychotic. And if I use my silly bell curve, we kind of think, okay, they're like down on the low side of the bell curve. Not so good. Okay, but then we could imagine an enlightened guru, spiritual teacher that's like, all consciousness is one, and I've transcended my individual consciousness, and my consciousness has kind of like merged with the cosmic collective consciousness, and we're all one consciousness and we're together. And that person maybe is kind of in a similar state and maybe saying a similar thing, but maybe that person is actually like enlightened or wise or sees more than the people in the middle of the bell curve. But they're kind of saying a similar thing, and they're saying a thing that is against consensus reality. So these two people are deviating from consensus reality. Yes. One of them's a nut job, and one of them is a genius. And that's this interesting question.
Right, okay, but so just to be clear about what a bell curve is, because it's just an interpretation of statistics, right? So if we take 100 people, 95% of them would be within some form of the middle, but that's not that. I'm oversimplifying because I just don't want to get into how many standard deviations there are. But
right, so in the middle, within two standard deviations, 95% of people are in two standard deviations, and that 95%, or maybe three standard deviations would have 99%. All of those people within standard would agree that no one can read each other's minds. Our consciousnesses are different. So everyone agrees with that. That's consensual reality, is that mind reading or consciousness merging is impossible. That's consensus reality. And then these two people, the nut job and the genius, are deviating from that.
Consensus reality where, though? Where on the planet? Consensus reality in America today? Because
I think if you asked every person on planet Earth, 95% of them would say, no, it's impossible to read each other's thoughts.
But then there would be, as is on the tail end of, are we talking about one end is going to be the genius, so 2.5% of the population are going to be able to understand a type of mind reading by body language understanding, by listening to the pauses and subtle cues of people's use of language and the stuttering I just did right there, versus like the other tail end, which would be like, oh, I have somehow become in touch with the Pleiadians, and so then I'm being talked to by alien entities, and then those entities come, which and it's not. I'm actually getting lost because those people who believe in this may not actually be psychotic. This is potentially just a belief system that helps them navigate the world. And with enough people, there's plenty of fucking groups of people where there's hundreds of them together and they agree upon certain angels and that they have rituals that puts them in contact with things. And that is a consensus reality. And so therefore, they are not psychotic. they may be living in a state of, but you see, here's the problem. This is why I said we should fucking start the game, is because unless we start talking about these people, the word psychotic doesn't mean anything. There isn't even a test to show that you are psychotic. There's no singular test. And then it's like, well, then I don't think anyone listening to this even knows what psychotic means. And so, like, in the same sense, let's start backwards. Let's start with enlightenment. What do you think enlightenment is? How would you define it?
I guess well, there would be a lot of different definitions of enlightenment, but there's probably
just pick
we
one.
could probably narrow it down on a few. But okay, I'll just pick maybe the most common one. It's not my favorite, but it's probably the most common one, and that is when you have reached an awareness, and that you can kind of like maintain your consciousness in this awareness most of the time or all of the time, where you've reached an awareness that your consciousness and you isn't distinct from the eternal all of the universe. And then when your consciousness has sort of connected to and merged with that eternal, non-dual, infinite love that is the universe, then you're not tortured by needs. You've transcended the pleasure-pain world, and you've sort of like transcended your individual consciousness and merged with this infinite, eternal love that is the universe.
Okay, perfect. That's like a Buddhist, that is a, what are those? What is it called? What did American people do when they adopted Eastern thought? It's like I don't know. Well, okay, so that was a type of a Buddhist form of a definition, but it's an American adopted idea. It's but so a really simple definition is like, you no longer have to, or you no longer function by the rules of the world that are previously described. That is an enlightened person. Now, this is where things get really weird, because people would say like, oh, well, then this new generation who are trying to just tear down the establishment, they are coming from an enlightened place. But it's like no, actually no. Like they're functioning from a whole bunch of Marxist ideas and a bunch of borrowed ideas that are not there. So therefore, they are functioning from within the rules of the world. They're just choosing different ones than is the larger consensus reality. Right? So in the pursuit of figuring out who is in a psychedelic realm, who has entered into a world of psychosis as defined by actual delusions, which let's see, who do you think has more actual delusions, Trump or Kanye? But let me just define what delusions are, right? So delusions are to have ideas that persist against all evidence of the contrary.
Right.
Right. So if you have ideas that I want to add Elon Musk to this. I want to add Elon Musk here, but like, who do you think has ideas that persist? And here's the crazy thing: none of us, including anyone who would be watching this, know these people well enough to really do this. So that's why I'm saying it's a game. This isn't really clinical. It's silly.
Right, but we both, well, especially with Trump, but also with Kanye, we have enough data from them. I mean, they've shared a lot with us, so we've seen a lot of sides of them. So we have enough to at least play a game with them, if not comment somewhat intelligently on their state, unless they're acting, which is possible, but I doubt that. I think they're showing us what they really believe and feel. I think Kanye and Trump are in a pretty similar state. I had never thought of that until you brought it up right now. But if I try to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being a person's not hardly delusional, 10 is like you're as delusional as a person could be, I'd give them both like an 8. I'd rank them both like an 8. And I'd say that qualitatively, I think they have a similar type of delusionalness, and I would call it narcissistic delusion, where you start to think that you're sort of godlike, and that whatever you think and just who you are is this great, wonderful, transcendent thing, and whatever you think is the truth, and people need to like listen to you, and you know everything, and you're bearer of this truth that's going to like positively change the world. I think both Kanye and Trump kind of have that same delusion.
Okay, I'm tempted to agree with you on that. Exactly. Right?
What do you you have some disagreement. What's the disagreement?
Well, I have some disagreement just in that like I want to see which ideas do they cling to in opposition to like just this the glaring contrast of the reality of fact. Like, what is it exactly that these guys are doing? Because otherwise they're not delusional. Otherwise the two of them are fucking geniuses that have been sent to save us from a world of barbarism.
Well, Kanye has been sent to save us from the Jews. Apparently, that's his recent thing. And Trump has been sent to save us from
China.
Any non-Americans, maybe especially China, and also like liberals who are don't recognize how awesome he is or something.
Yes, that. But then where is the evidence of the contrary? That like in the beginning you said that it was potentially true that Kanye was a musical genius, right? So in a sense there is some potential divinity in that. Wrong word though. Sorry. There is some uniqueness as the spectrum would admit. That he would be far out there.
Right. That brings me into this. I think part of the reason, I don't know, but I used this bell curve metaphor, and I don't think it's a good one. And I think maybe that's the reason you were balking at my whole bell curve thing, is because I think in the discussion we're trying to have, I think the bell curve is not an accurate and is a kind of a red herring. It like pulls us away from the truth. Because I think the truth is that when humans move away from orthodox consciousness, like be a square, color within the lines, when we start to move away from it, we can go to these different realms that the genius or the enlightened person and the crazy psychotic person, they're going into the same realm, actually. And so I think that what determines whether or not they're a genius or a nut job isn't a quality. I don't know what it is, and I think that's what we should talk about. But I think that Kanye, my guess is that Kanye and so many artistic geniuses like Van Gogh comes to mind, but really the list of artistic geniuses who are also crazy is a long list.
Yeah.
And it's not a accident that artistic geniuses are often crazy. There's like good reason for that, and that's
let me ask you,
very relevant to our conversation.
Are there a lot of like mathematician and or physics geniuses that are also crazy? Like,
well, I think in a different way. I think so. And you can think of these like. There's idiot savants, like autistic people who have an extreme mathematical genius, and I think that that's kind of the case. I remember hearing something that someone examined Einstein's brain, and his brain was odd. And you just think about like Bill Gates or even Elon Musk. There's talk about them being on the spectrum, and it does seem like that there's something odd about these people. So yeah, I think, right. And it's a different type of consciousness, but same thing. Bill Gates and Elon Musk, they're kind of deviating from the normal consciousness, and it gives them a certain genius.
Yes.
And I think Kanye is deviating from the normal, and it gives him a certain genius. And Van Gogh and whoever else we could think of.
But that's where this idea of making a direct comparison to, like, are these people living in a truly psychedelic realm? Like, actually, they wake up, their dreams, their real life is like what the rest of us would experience as an acid trip. Are they actually in a full-on psychedelic realm, or are they crossing over into a world of psychosis as defined by it? In the case of Kanye and Trump, it is only delusions. They do not have admitted hallucinations. They don't have psychomotor retardation. They don't have. That's why I don't think Kanye is bipolar. But they're also they don't exhibit the kinds of formal speech. What is that called when you have like a formal, like you can get thought blocking. You can have like what is referred to as word salad, or you get there's like 5 different categories of identifiable language and or written expression dilemmas that happen in a psychotic state. And I don't believe that Trump and in fact, no, they don't. They don't exhibit these. In fact, Biden exhibits more of them than they do. But that's just cruel. That's actually
that's when you if you really work with a large number of people who are psychotic, what you learn is that the diversity in the way in which they're psychotic is really large. There's so many different types of crazy this type of crazy can be opposite this type of crazy. And there's a million different ways and worlds and realms and universes a person can go into to be crazy. And so I think it's a mistake I don't blame anyone, but it's a mistake to try to lump them all together into a category. And the word psychotic is just I think psychotic just means out of touch with reality. And it gets back to this deviating from consensually agreed upon what reality is. And if you deviate from that, you're psychotic.
Well, but so what in the case of Elon Musk, right? Now, obviously this didn't happen in one day. It took a very long time, but he says some crazy shit like, hey, I'm going to send people to Mars. I'm going to build some weird machine that will dig tunnels under the ground so that cars will travel that way. I'm going to build whatever Tesla became. I'm going to build this supercomputer that then will be able to produce what Tesla is going to become. And anyone who would listen to this prior to where we are today would be like, this guy's a fucking nut job. That is, like, everything he's saying is completely nonsense. Except, like, here we are today, and because he's actually doing it, then what is that? That then falls into what appears to me when I look at him is that I look at a man who is not living in the same world as me. I'm like...
Right, but the difference between him and a nut job is he can think outside the box in the way that your average Joe can't. But then he has 1 foot in reality and 1 foot in his visionary genius, enough that he can work productively towards his visionary genius. Whereas the nut job who 20 years ago is like, I'm going to invent an electric car, and they're a homeless person, they're just in their electric car fantasy, but they don't have 1 foot in reality that would allow them to actually like manifest this thing.
Okay, let me ask you then. What now? So Trump has 1 foot in reality, and then he has 1 foot in his visionary reality. So much so that he was elected to be the president, and all kinds of people like think he's and they think he's amazing. They still
and that this is why I don't like Trump as an example for this topic of discussion.
Why?
Is because he does have one foot in reality, and then his other foot isn't in psychedelic genius. His other foot is in narcissism. In fact, 1.9 of his feet is in narcissism, and he has one little toe back in reality. And so the realm of narcissism, it can be a certain type of genius. Like if we think of Frank Sinatra. I think Frank Sinatra was very narcissistic, and it allowed him to be sort of an artistic genius because just the level of confidence and swag, and he was a genius vocalist because his confidence in his voice, and he could express this thing. So Frank Sinatra had one foot in reality that allowed him to practice enough to become a good musician. And he had one foot in a narcissistic realm that allowed him to just be this larger than life musician. So yeah, the narcissism thing can kind of give genius. And we almost could think any great entertainer or actor probably has this narcissistic thing. And Trump has that. But I don't know, it's not a very, it feels to me, it's not that fascinating of a realm of thinking outside the box, because it's like you're thinking outside the box of there's 8 billion people in the world and we're all normal, into the box of, no, I'm better than everyone else. Okay, that's cool, and that can be helpful, and it can make you become president of the US, or it can make you sing like Frank Sinatra. So there is genius to it, but it's not psychedelic, and it doesn't transcend the box in these exciting ways, I don't think.
Okay. I see your point, and unfortunately then I just want to destabilize you again. And I don't know what my problem is today, but so sorry about that. Okay, I'll let go of Trump. So then now I would like to bring in the Dalai Lama, or the Dalai Lama, however you want to say it, right? The Dalai Lama. How many people do you think he's a narcissist? Because he has a lot of shared fucking qualities with these guys. In fact,
describe it.
So he is, by definition, the reincarnation of Buddha, and therefore is enlightened. He is enlightened. And then he goes around and meets with all kinds of dignitaries and important heads of state and country and all kinds of celebrities. And but I don't think many people would say that he's a narcissist. And why? Why not?
Let's hear your assessment and diagnosis of the Dalai Lama.
Well, I think that as he's put into a position where he is supposed to be someone who is of this world through my definition of enlightenment, which means that he must then function as if he is not being programmed by the previous reality, meaning he would have to be able to perceive how to act in a way that would really be unique. And I think that this is just a strange function of a long living tradition from Tibet. And I don't think that the Dalai Lama is actually a reincarnation of Buddha, because this brings into a question of, do I think reincarnation is a real thing? Do I think that that one would attain enlightenment and then stay enlightened? So then when he hangs out with Richard Gere, he's enlightened? That's what enlightened people do?
And so you're saying you don't think he's enlightened, and if he now I don't know if I don't think I've heard him claim to be enlightened.
It's not even him. It's by definition of his position. He's
right.
Not,
and that's the tradition, and he has been born into and thrown into that tradition.
Yes.
But you don't ever hear him profess, I'm enlightened, in the way you hear some teachers profess they're enlightened. He never does that.
I don't think he does, which would then somewhat shelter him from the scrutiny or the false allocation of this man as a narcissist.
And then with the question of the narcissist, the vibe I get from him, and I'm no expert on the Dalai Lama, but the vibe I get from him is that it's almost the opposite of narcissism, is that his whole goal is to like have compassion for other people and to like give love to other people. And I do feel like when I see him or hear him talk, I do feel like he genuinely really is aiming for that. Like he's not, it feels opposite to Trump. Trump is kind of trying to do this, everyone, I need you to see how great I am. Whereas the Dalai Lama feels like, I really want to give love to everybody else, and I really love and care for everyone on the planet.
But let's just look at how the two were created, right? Like the Dalai Lama from emergence is bestowed this incredible thing where he's recognized as a individual with tremendous potential, and so then he can cultivate this quality of anti-narcissism. He has this unique thing where there's an entire world around him that supports him to be a self that promotes the well-being of others. But I don't know where in our country we have something that would promote a human being to be like that. I don't see how that would be. We promote something very different here. We promote that like you as an individual have to go out and strive and make something of yourself, and whatever shitty background you come from, because everyone came from small little worlds that then are increasingly becoming more and more expansive as we're all interconnected. It's like I grew up on this tiny little street called Center Street that had dirt roads in Florida. And I just remember like there were neighbors that had like T-top convertibles and like 1970s torn jeans, and just like there was like, it was such a poor and tiny little place in the universe. And then as like when I think back to that, and you think like, well, will this little child grow up to be able to have strange expansive views where we end up trying to figure out, is the Dalai Lama enlightened, and or is there a shared delusion with Trump and Kanye? Like, I could have never imagined that little kid growing up on that dirt street would then somehow be able to have these kinds of concepts. And I think that is a totally weird American thing that then, I think that's happened to all of us. I don't think there's anything special about me. Like, I literally came from a shitty little dirt road. They paved it now, but like, I don't live there. And like, there's some, and I don't know what to make of that compared to like, if you were born into some kind of a embrace where people right from the beginning said, hey, you're really special, but you're special in this way where you're going to give back. And I wonder, like, if as Kanye becomes recognized as someone special, it's way later in his maturation. And then, but this is just my speculation. I don't know the guy. I actually don't even know his history. I don't know. This is like my projective imagination onto what causes someone to to then end up with an idea that they are so special that they would have to inform the world of
well, right. And that gets back to my differentiation between the genius and the nut job, is that the genius, and let's use the Dalai Lama as an example. I don't know if he's a good one for this, but he probably, if I try to force this metaphor to work, which maybe it does, that the Dalai Lama is really anchored in his specialness and how great and unique and gifted he is, but he's also very, very, very well anchored in how special everyone else is, and that his specialness should be to try to help and love and have compassion for everyone else. So there's this I, thou, anchored in himself and anchored in the collective and everyone else. Whereas Kanye and Trump, they're also very anchored in how special they are, but they've completely lost any anchoring of anyone else's specialness, to the point of they're the only special ones and everyone else is a meaningless idiot that should just be like their little pawns or their little followers and should just pray to how great they are. And so whatever Kanye or Trump think, they can just go and they do, and everyone should just fall in line with there. So the Dalai Lama and Trump and Kanye are radically different on that sense of how special everyone else is.
I would think that the way that people spoke about the Queen who just passed, Queen of England, that the way they spoke about her in her position of inheritance into a otherwise very, very powerful and influential position, and the way that she held and reacted in that way sounds very much like the Dalai Lama. Like,
right? Yep,
like,
I can see that.
Like in the same way that we were going to compare Kanye to Trump, which is not, of course, they're not the same at all in some cases, but I would say that so I do think that the Dalai Lama is in a way enlightened, but then that comes into question of like I don't think that you can be enlightened in the way that you could say you're always enlightened. Like, in the same sense that I don't think when you're psychotic, you're always psychotic, actually. I think that it's a state that comes and goes. Like, I think that you...
Well, for sure, and I definitely agree with you, enlightenment, although I do think some psychotic people slip into psychosis and remain there forever.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they slip... Let me bring this metaphor, and it's kind of a somewhat of a famous metaphor, and I think it is helpful in this discussion. And that there's some saying, it's like the psychotic and the guru are both swimming in the same ocean, but the guru's swimming and enjoying the water, and the psychotic is drowning in it. That's some famous saying. Now, if we add into that picture dry land, I think all the normal people are standing up on dry land. And I think if we try to describe the difference in a simple way, is the psychotic person is in the water, and the water is this realm of consciousness where all things blend into one, and you can read each other's thoughts, and you can see the symbolic connections between all people. That's
the psychedelic world.
And that's the psychedelic world. And the psychotic person is in that world. So in a sense, they have access to that genius type of consciousness, but they're drowning in it. They don't know how to swim, and they don't know how to get out of the water. The quote normal people who are in the 95% of the bell curve, they've gotten out of the water and they're up on land, and they just want to stay on land, and they've forgotten all about the watery realm.
Yeah.
And so when anyone talks up from this watery psychedelic realm, they think they're crazy. But then the genius, artistic genius, guru, enlightened person, they've gotten out of the water. They've learned how to walk along, but then they can go back into the water when they want. And when they go in the water, they can swim and they can come in and out. Yeah. So the psychotic is stuck in the water and drowning, Most people are stuck on the land. They've forgotten all about the water. And the genius artistic person knows how to go in and out. And when you say enlightenment isn't a permanent state, but I do think there's this movement in and out of the water and how deep you're in or how much or have 1 foot in or 1 foot out. And the truly enlightened person probably can go in and out and navigate this.
That I can't believe it took us like 45 minutes to get here, but that was the best description of the comparison of the 3 states that I've ever heard. That was super cool.
And then I want to add to that the water is like, I think we could talk for a long time about what the water represents, because I sort of think there's tons of different bodies of water, you know? And the one I wanted to talk about was like the psychedelic one, because I think the reason there's this renaissance of psychedelics is all these land-dwelling people take a psychedelic so that they can experience the water.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, is like going into these realms. But each different psychedelic puts you into a different body of water.
Yes.
And I think there's tons of bodies of water. And the Trump Kanye thing is, I actually think there's like a how special I am. There's that body of water. And we want everyone to get to really know your specialness. And I think that when we're raising our kids, we're trying to get them to know their specialist. But coming out of that onto the land is like knowing that, yeah, but you're just one human among 8 billion and you're not that special.
Right.
And you want to be able to integrate those two things. And that's what Trump and Kanye can't do.
Yeah. I think that's such a good point. Thus, the being able to slip in and then back out. But even though, as you hear with various artistic geniuses, they have to do a lot of strange things sometimes to get themselves to go into it, including one guy from the last podcast who would explain that you would have to attempt to meditate and then put yourself intentionally into a thing that would allow you to then even begin to realize, oh, wait, there is a part where I will experience more of the world than just my finite self, that all I care about is like what kind of macros I'm eating and what's my deadlift today, like that.
Yep.
Like, and as you get past that, well, that's why I mentioned this game, and I wanted to talk about the people. I didn't know that what I really hoped we would talk about was this. I didn't know that. But now we're here and I'm like, fuck, yes, that's what I was hoping. But then look, how are you supposed to just announce when I'm a drylander, right? Like, how am I supposed to announce, hey, Dave, dude, I want to talk to you about like the really bizarre reality that, hey, that some of us will end up with like really fractured selves that are false, right? Like, I believe that I'm way less than, and that's not really true. And then there's other people who are like, I am so fantastic, and you're like, no, you're not really, buddy. But and then between it all, there is a kind of a realm, and the psychedelic renaissance that you talk about is really fascinating in that it does allow people who are very normal to then be invited in to have a conversation like this.
Yep.
Like, I think that's really cool. But then again, I'm scared of taking 4 grams of dried mushrooms myself.
Well, yeah, because it's like us drylanders, I do think we need to start dipping our toes in or trying to learn to swim in that cosmic ocean of altered states of consciousness, because it helps complexify and enrich our consciousness. But it also can destabilize us, and you want to just go dip your toe in, but you might fucking slip in there and flounder around down in there with the psychotic people.
Yeah, that's not what anybody wants to do. Well, certainly in our profession, we spend a lot of time trying to help people get out of the water. We're like lifeguards.
Yeah.
You know? We're like lifeguards, but in a way, not really. Because you and I don't truly live in, as you were saying, your life has naturally forced you to have a relationship with this delirium and altered state, right?
Right.
And in a similar way, some of us have had strange phenomenon that create a psychedelic reality, but it's not like, it's almost like helping your patients is a way to, you know what? I'm going to abandon that.
I thought this is where you were going. Let me say this, is that the typical medical model of mental health treatment is being a lifeguard. And it's like, oh shit, those people are drowning in cosmic consciousness. Let's give them antipsychotics and whatever and pull them up onto dry land.
Yes.
And get them to be dry land functioning people. That's the typical mainstream medical model of mental health treatment. But then there's weird therapists like you and me that are like, okay, that can be a valuable thing to do, but sometimes it can be valuable to encourage the drylanders to go dip their toes in or swim in. And it's just more complex around getting out of the water, getting back in the water, figuring out how to swim, figuring out how to come out, and everyone's in a different stage of that.
But isn't it weird that you and I consider ourselves to be depth psychologists, yet we don't do psychedelics, and we don't encourage anyone to take psychedelics. But so that is, I guess that's really different because of the...
Well, and that's partially what the topic of last week's thing was, is, yeah, I'm not actively encouraging people to take psychedelics, but if they want to, I sort of like encourage them, but I'm not like force feeding them it, but I am probably encouraging being a little more flexible about your states of consciousness to try to like open it up and explore different states of consciousness, including more psychedelic ones or creative ones, or merger with the eternal allness or whatever. I do think I do that, but I think maybe my thing is to do that in a way that, and I'm not opposed to using substances, but you just are using your consciousness to flex out and expand your consciousness, and that you aren't necessarily dependent on drugs.
Would you support me bull riding as an attempt to expand my consciousness?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I just want to point out that there are many things in this world that will literally take you so far out of what you think is even possible. Like, just imagine taking a normal person and we're like, okay, we're gonna train you, bro, and then we're gonna actually let you bull ride. Like, no way.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I just recently saw this documentary on French bullfighters, and unlike Spain, in France, they don't try to kill the bulls. They don't have a sword. They don't do anything. They just go out there and try to survive. And you can see the good ones go into this certain state of consciousness, of like a consciousness merger with the bull and in their body. And it's totally a different state of consciousness that they go into.
Wow, that's awesome, man. Well, okay. Hey, this game turned out to be pretty fascinating in the end. But so I guess let's wrap, man.
All right.
Hey,
sounds good.
Okay. Awesome.
Until next week.
Yeah, buddy. Okay.
All right.
Later, man.
Bye-bye.